Hello and welcome to today's webinar. Today we will look at rule chains in OCS360. Let's look at our agenda for today. We're going to start with a quick review of OCS360 and then we are going to get into today's topic and answer some questions such as what are rule chains, what are common uses of rule chain, and there will be demonstrations throughout and we will finish with a Q&A session. Here is a quick review of OCS360 Cloud Service. It is a new cloud service from Horner, making it as easy as possible to push data from a PLC-like device, in this case the Horner OCS, to the cloud using a special version of MQTT that is built into Prime and Canvas controllers, and there are no extra licensing required. With OCS360 you get data recording up to 5 years, dashboarding and alarm annunciation and notification. So what is rule chain? A rule chain is the logic that is written in a node-based programming language that is executed by a rule engine in the OCS360 application. If you go to the rule chain section of OCS360, you can see the root rule chain which is included with OCS360 that we have got here on the screen. There are a lot of advanced things you can do with rule chains. For instance, you can manipulate incoming messages that come into OCS360. You can create new variables based on existing variables. So if you have a piece of pressure data, for instance, that you are sending up to the cloud, you do not have to push both PSI and bars up to the cloud. You can just push one of them and then do a conversation using rule chains right within OCS360 itself. So that is a common type of use. You can also do some complex rules or create some rules for creating alarms. That is another thing you can do. You can create an automatic alarm response by OCS360 when an alarm occurs if you want to do that as well. You can also automatically control a variable in reaction to a specific condition, as well as variables are being pushed to OCS360. You could have a piece of rule chain logic that detects a specific condition in that variable that is being pushed to the cloud and then reacts to that by writing a variable value back down to the controller automatically without having to have a human intervention. So there is a lot you can do with rule chains. Rule chains are a node-based logic language. So the building blocks of the rule chain are nodes, and there are a few dozen different nodes available for you to use in your rule chain logic, and they are divided into 5 different categories. There is a filter category. What is that used for? It can be used for message filtering, alarm filtering, even geofencing. What are the enrichment nodes for? You can manipulate device attributes, customer attributes. You can trigger an email. You can rename or delete variables. Why would you want to delete a variable? Well, after you push a variable into OCS360, you want to monitor that variable, but then you want to delete it before it gets recorded. Maybe you do not want it to be in the recording for the 5 years of maximum recording. So that would be the reason to do that. For instance, if you have got an action category, you can use those actions to clear alarms, assign alarms, create alarms, control devices. These are all things that would occur without human intervention. You would set this up rule chain ahead of time, and then that action would take place per you prescribed programming of the rule chain. And then there is also a flow category of nodes which allow you to link a customer rule chain to the default rule chain. For instance, for today's example, we are going to effectively create a new variable based on another variable that is being pushed to OCS360. This is what we are going to do as our example of using a rule chain. So that is happening here. That is our example device we have used is an OCS that is pushing data to the cloud. It is a Prime unit and we have named it in OCS360 as Epoxymatic. The Epoxymatic has been pushing a variable called temperature to OCS360 for weeks now, and that is expressed in degrees C. That is the format that it has been reported in. Created a rule chain piece of logic that takes a variable coming in temperature and it converts it to degrees F instead of C and stores it in a different variable called temperature F, and that variable is not one that is being pushed to the cloud directly. It is being created by the chain rule and it does not count towards our number of variables per minute. Now to create this new variable that is being a converted version of another variable, we are going to use the math function node, which we can find in the action nodes category. So that is what we are going to use that for. and on the screen all you see still is the root node chain without any changes made. When we click on the math function node, automatically the dialog box pulls up and then we can start configuring it. We need to assign a name to this node. We call this one on the screen C to F because that is what it is doing. It is a good idea to turn on the debug mode switch in the upper right hand corner there. That way we can see this particular variable in action. When we go take a look at the device, we can look at the different variables being pushed by that device. This won't be listed among them. We will not see only temperature, but we will see this new variable that we are creating, and then in the case of the math function block, we need to select what function we are going to be using. And in our case, we are doing a customer function which allows us to type a complete expression in. The other options are things like add, subtract. So if we were just doing a simple add only, we would not have to use the custom function. Then we need to configure the arguments. What are the arguments in this case? First of all, what is the variable or key that we are having in the expression? It represents the variable x in this math function node, and that particular key we are looking for is our temperature variable that is being pushed from the epoxymatic. We fill in a default value, which we will put in as 0, and then we will fill in the mathematical expression at the bottom. Now this is what we need to do. At the bottom under the expression, a label that we placed on the screen, you can see the particular equation that we are going to be executing. X times 1.8 plus 32. Now we are almost done. The last couple of things we have to configure in the math function node is we need to configure the results. What is the result? Now the type is just a message, and the key is the name of the new variable that we are creating. And the original variable that we use as our basic was called temperature. We have decided to name the resultant new variable that we have created temperature F, and then we need to specify how many digits after the floating point we want this value to be limited to, and so you can also fill in the description at the bottom if you would like. What we have done is configure the node, and now we need to put it in the rule chain. We need to position the node in the post-elementary flow area. So if you take a look at the before section of our slide here, after post-telemetry, we go directly to the save time series. That is where everything is saved. So what we are going to do before the save occurs is we are going to insert this node. It is a math function type, and it has been named C to F by us. That is going to be inserted in the post-elementary area before we save time series. And then that success bubble you see on the arrow after the math function, that is just indicating that it should occur after successful implementation of a math function. So this is what things look like on the rule chain. For our demonstration, we are going to start by logging into OCS360. We are going to click on the rule chains. Here we have our root rule chain that is being shown. Let's click on it, and here is what it looks like. Now our one is not the default because we have added this math function, so we could create a new variable. We inserted a node that we named C to F, and what it is doing is taking one of the existing variables or keys that are being pushed to the OCS360 from our OCS. It is called temperature. This is the name of that variable, and created a new variable called temperature F, and we did that by adding this math function in the flow between post-elementary and save time series. We can tell that it is working by going to the device list, going to our device and clicking on it, and then looking at the latest elementary and seeing not only temperature, which is being pushed directly by the OCS, but temperature F, which is being created by the rule chain modification directly in the OCS360. And this variable here, temperature F. Now let's go back to the rule chain area and let's make another change. So we are going to go back to the root rule chain, and what we are going to do is something similar. We're going to insert another math function, this time going to take another variable that is being pushed by the OCS to the OCS360 called pressure, and that is in PSI. And we are going to create a new variable in bars. So that is the plan for this modification. It is going to start out the same way the last one did. We need to find the action node for math. We go to the action nodes and we select the math function. We drag it out into our workspace here. we need to give this node a name. So we are going to call this the PSI2 bar. And then the source is the data coming in from a message. But instead of that message being the temperature variable, it is going to be our pressure variable. And that temperature was just the default that they have in here. Let's type in our variable name, that is our key, which is pressure. We are going to assign a default value of 0. And then we are going to type in our expression. Our expression is going to be to convert from PSI to bar. Our expression is going to be x times 0.0689475729. We are taking our pressure, which is x, and multiplying by this constant, and the result is going to be in a new variable that we are going to call pressure bar. Let's do 5 digits, then let's hit add. So we have added this node here. Now we just have to put in the proper place in the rule chain. We're going to drag it, and what we want to do is we need to put it in a series. So with this other math function, we are going to move this from there to here, and we are going to make more space, and we are going to connect from here to here, but only on success, and hit add. So now between our post-elementary flow, we have our math function creating a new variable for degrees F, another math function create a new variable for PSI to bar, and it is right in line with the time series. Let's go back to this node, and we will hit the edit button, and we want to allow debug mode. That way we can look at live values, and it will show up in our list of telemetry of the latest telemetry. So we are going to hit save here and close, and we need to hit save here. Those changes have been applied. Now let's just check our work by going back to the device section, selecting our device that has been pushed out of the pressure variables, going into our latest telemetry, and here it is. Not only do we have pressure, we have also got pressure bar. Now you probably are pushing your data out once per minute, so be aware after you make this change, you may have to wait for up to a minute if you are pushing your data out once per minute for this to show up here, because it needs a new value of pressure before it can work on this. That concludes our webinar for today. Thank you so much for listening, and the Q&A session will begin shortly.